Hello everyone, Ember here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one I'd like to look at some Cofagrigus deck ideas from the set Surging Sparks. So Cofagrigus is this new psychic Pokemon that's coming out in the new set, and I love Cofagrigus both as a Pokemon and as this card. However, one thing I will say is I don't think this card is by any means broken, I don't think it's going to be destroying regional championships. Fingers crossed that it does. I think it'd be very funny if it did, but I don't think this card will be, S tier broken, but I do think it makes for a really fun Roka deck. So yeah, do like Cofagrigus quite a bit. So if you don't know what this guy does, it has the attack Underworld Rule, which allows you to put 6 damage counters on each Pokemon that has an ability. Which sounds great in theory, right? 6 damage counters on each of my opponent's Pokemon that has an ability. Fantastic. However, it's both yours and your opponent's, which automatically limits what you can actually pair up with Cofagrigus, because if you use this attack too many times, you'll end up KOing your own Pokemon. So yeah, bit of a risky situation to be in for Cofagrigus, but yeah, very fun card nonetheless. So the first few ideas we can take a look at here are going to be the budget ones. Now, if you don't know what this Alolan Dugtrio does, for 0 energy, so you only have to play Psychic Energy in the deck, it does 120 damage, but you can only use this attack if you have 3 cards in your hand. So it's kind of like a very low damage output variant of a deck. Like, I know Cofagrigus is only spreading 60 damage to begin with, and Dugtrio will only be doing 120. But if you can get some early KOs on evolving Pokemon, then I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, and you can always KO bigger EX Pokemon. Of course, Alolan Diglett is very fragile, so you will have to put up with basically being just mauled by Dragapult, I think. But aside from that, it seems like a very fun budget idea to try out. Also got this Raticate with the attack Second Bite for double colorless, does 30 damage and 30 more for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. So the synergy here is fairly obvious. We just use Cofagrigus several times, and then Second Bite just KOs anything basically. So yeah, it's definitely a 2-hit KO style budget deck, which is again quite risky in a format that's so focused around 2-price Pokemon, because you might struggle to prize trade effectively late game. But if you can get some sniping in there, take some extra prize cards against stuff like Bibarel while you're at it, while you're killing your opponent's active, then, I do think you might be able to stay ahead on the prize race, or at least compete. So Raticate seems to be okay. Also got the Hisuian Arcanine, which is essentially a Lowland Dugtrio, but you're doing more damage, which is kind of cool. But the offset is you have to have no cards in hand instead. So Cofagrigus doesn't actually require that much to get going. It's a stage 1 with 1 psychic energy needed. And Hisuian Arcanine is 0 energy stage 1, so, quite nice in that department. But you have to have no cards in your hand, which is very awkward. And 160 isn't quite what it used to be, but, it still leagues better than 120, really. So sorry, Dugtrio fans, but Arcanine's probably the better option here. But, if you want to mess around with either of these, Dugtrio is definitely going to be easier to get a hold of, just as a budget deck from the same set. But, just thought it was worth mentioning and quite a fun option. But on to some Pokemon EX ideas. We have Galvantula EX, which is personally my favorite. Charge Web doing 220 if your opponent's already in EX or a V. So 220, just plus 260, 280, lovely. Love that kind of modifiers. But also just means that you can just play around Galvantula EX as the fact that it doesn't have ability. So you're just sitting there doing Charge Web, maybe Fulgurite if you really want to. But for the most part, you just play like Lightning Psych Energy probably, and just go for Charge Web and Cofagrigus Spread. Similar situation for Terrapagos, really. Unified Beatdown doing 30 damage for each of your bench Pokemon. So the whole idea here is that we're not playing too many other Pokemon that actually have abilities, but, we can fill up our bench with stuff like Cofagrigus and Yamask. Then Terrapagos EX is basically our secondary attacker. So that's kind of the process there. Banette EX is infinitely more niche, but I thought it would deserve a mention because it's Banette EX. Banette EX hasn't exactly done anything in the TCG. Like, I think it got a top 16 at a regional or something recently with Gardevoir, but, that was a Gardevoir deck. It doesn't count in my book. But yeah, Everlasting Darkness is kind of cool. Poltergeist is kind of fun. But it's more the fact that it's a psychic type, it's another stage 1, and it also has no ability. So, thought it was worth bringing up. Also got Dragapult EX, which I know can be a bit risky because Dracoloak does have an ability, right? So you will have to be very careful. Like, what I recommend doing really is having a Dreepy in the active, evolve to Dracoloak, then do Dracopult EX, or just Rare Candy straight up there, use Phantom Dive or Jet Headbutt. So basically just lead the game with Dragapult because it's quite, tanky. And then sweep in with Cofagrigus afterwards, once you've got your Dragapults evolved up. Or the alternative is actually just use Cofagrigus and then Rare Candy when you absolutely need Dragapult. But yeah, Phantom Dive for a Psychic Fire G does 200 damage, and you get to put 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon any way you like. So yeah, quite a nice Hoover to be honest, and very, very tanky. But some spread ideas. Now, sadly, Cofagrigus EX has an ability. So even though it has great synergy with Hollow Hands, doing 110 and put 5 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon in any way you like, it has an ability, sadly, which is a good ability at the end of the day, but at only 260 HP, the minute you use one of your own Cofagrigus, this EX Pokemon will turn into a 200 HP EX Pokemon, sorry. So, yeah, very fragile, sadly, but I just thought it was worth mentioning because it's quite funny. But yeah, also got Magius, which is another notable spread Pokemon. Again, has an ability, so if you use more than one Cofagrigus, you will just board wipe yourself at that point, but I still think you get around it. Just use Magius first, basically. Use one or two of them, and then move in with Cofagrigus to hoover up a bit. Then we have Frostlass with the ability Freezing Shroud. During your Pokemon checkup, put 1 damage counter on each Pokemon play that has an ability. So yes, you will still be carrying your own Frostlass. I do think it's quite funny because you could still have like a 1-1 Frostlass in the deck and then maybe clean up with Freezing Shroud in the late game. Of course, you'll still have to do 60 damage to your own Frostlass, but it might be worth it in some situations. It might be. It's more of a case of experimentation, I think, with Cofagrigus for the most part, but still, I think Frostlass is quite funny. Then we get to the really risky ideas. So, Scavalion EX is a new Pokemon that has the attack Spicy Rage that does 10 damage and 70 more damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. And it also has an ability, so hopefully you can see where I'm going with this. So Cofagrigus just does 60 damage to Scavalion, and now Scavalion can want to kill any other Pokemon in the game. That's the deck. It's really not that complicated. You probably want to use Crispin just to help accelerate fire and psychic energy in the deck, but I just thought it was hilarious. Also, Scavalion can hit for weakness against stuff like Charizard, but probably doesn't matter because by the time you get around to using Spicy Rage from Cofagrigus, you'll be able to want to kill anything regardless. So yeah, quite a funny deck idea to be honest. Then we have Dodrio, which is the uber risky one, and why it's really, really risky with Dodrio is you literally can't afford to attack with Cofagrigus more than once. It's a similar situation with Steelix, really. Like, many players realize, by the way, if you want to beat Dodrio's Steelix, what you have to do is not KO Steelix and just boss Dodrio, because Steelix can't attack forever. It can't keep doing the 30 damage to each your bench Dodrio, because otherwise it'll just KO your entire board. So, just something worth bearing in mind. So yeah, you'll only be able to attack with Cofagrigus once and do 60 damage to each of your Dodrio, but that basically just sets you up for the rest of the game for Dodrio to just want to KO every Pokemon in its path, which is quite funny. Or most of them at the very least, KO V-Stars. Not quite Charizard, but I guess you could involve the new Gravity Mountain. So yeah, thought that was a funny idea. Also got this Palossand EX. Sand 2 is okay if you just want to buy yourself some more time. And then Barty Gel or Barati Gel. For a Water Psychic Fighting Energy, says put damage counters on each of your opponent's bench Pokemon until its remaining HP is 100. So of course, the synergy here is that we use this attack and then we just use Cofagrigus to hoover up the board. Now, this might be too much for a deck. It's fortunate that even though the attack cost is very awkward, there is a Psychic Energy in there. So, Crispin is very, very appealing for this combo, but again, it's a lot of work to get this running. But, there will be times where you just shrink all your opponent's, EXs, or even stuff like Barrel, shrink them all down to 100 HP, Cofagrigus comes in, you attack twice, you win the game, right? That will be a possibility with this deck. It's going to be very clunky, it's going to be very difficult to pull off, but when it works, oh my goodness, it will be glorious. So yeah, Palossand EX, but I think Scavalion might be just more consistent, to be honest. But yeah, thank you for watching. Got one more suggestion, by the way, that's Medicham, similar to a KO style deck, but yeah, just thought it was worth mentioning. But yeah, thank you for watching. Let me know what you think about Cofagrigus down below. Do any of these ideas appeal to you, And yeah, thank you for watching.